Hello everybody and welcome back to Expert.js. I'm Abrar and I'm going to be your instructor for this video. In this video we're going to be talking about becoming a JavaScript programmer. Now becoming a good programmer is not an easy task, so let's get right to it. Okay, first let's talk about becoming a programmer. So what is a programmer and how do you become one? While a programmer, a developer, or a coder is a person who writes computer programs and scripts. So whether you call yourself a programmer, a coder, or a developer, your job will most likely be to write code and use the code to create computer programs, software, applications, and other scripts. So that's the job of a programmer. A programmer is someone who writes code and creates programs and scripts. Now, a JavaScript programmer in particular must first and foremost understand the language in detail. That's obvious, right? Because if you are a JavaScript programmer, the very first thing that you'll need is to understand the JavaScript language itself. But just understanding the language is not enough. You need to understand the more complex and advanced features and even the more newer additions to the language as well. Because there are a lot of developers who are familiar with JavaScript, who know the basics of JavaScript, who have a good understanding of the language. However, just understanding the language is not enough. If you want to stand out from the crowd and become a really good JavaScript developer, you must understand all the aspects of the language in as much detail as you possibly can. So aim towards becoming an advanced level JavaScript developer. A lot of developers are familiar with JavaScript, however, a great JavaScript developer will stand out because of his or her advanced knowledge and experience. Now, programmers must continue learning and perfecting their craft to stay ahead. The programming landscape is ever changing, and each year new programming languages come to play, new libraries, new frameworks, a lot of new technologies and practices, so you must continue to learn both JavaScript and also other languages if you want to stay ahead and become a great developer. Now, what do JS developers actually do? Like, what are the roles and responsibilities of a typical JS developer? Now, JavaScript developers are generally responsible for writing front-end or client-side JavaScript code for websites, web applications, and other web-related scripts. Because JavaScript is the programming language of the web, it's most often used for front-end or client-side development. And most JavaScript developers often work on the front-end side or the client side of the project that they're working on. Some developers actually work on the full front-end, including HTML and CSS. So these developers don't only write JavaScript, but they also take care of the HTML and CSS. So they're a full-stack front-end developer. Others actually specialize in server-side JavaScript such as Node.js, Express.js, and databases. So although JavaScript is most popular for its uses on the front end, JavaScript can also be used on the back end with runtimes such as Node.js and frameworks such as Express.js. So sometimes these developers specialize on the back-end side of JavaScript and use JavaScript for server-side scripting and manipulating databases. And often you'll find full-stack developers who often use a specific technology stack, such as mean stack. The mean stack stands for MongoDB, Express.js, AngularJS, and Node.js. This is a full technology stack which can be used for front-end and back-end development altogether. In the mean stack, the MongoDB is the NoSQL database that is used for storing data on the server. Express.js is the Node.js framework, AngularJS is the front-end framework, and the Node.js is the JavaScript runtime that is used to run JavaScript on the server. So using such a technology stack, you can build a full-fledged web application using JavaScript. So after learning JavaScript, what type of developer you become will depend on you. If you want to focus on JavaScript specifically, you can become a front-end JavaScript developer who only works on JavaScript for the front end. But if you enjoy full front-end development, including HTML and CSS, you might become a full-stack front-end developer. Otherwise, you might even want to specialize on server-side JavaScript development or a full technology stack such as the mean stack. So what type of a JavaScript developer you become depends on your interest and where you want to go. And specifically what work you'll do as a developer will depend on what your role is and what type of a developer you become. Now let's take a moment to talk about some programmer skills. Now programming is not an easy task, but it's not that hard either. Programming does require some practice and dedication. However, there are some other skills programmers must master as well. For example, programmers must understand the project, the team's goals, and their own roles and responsibilities in the project as well. So programmers must not only know their language and know how to write code, but at the same time, they must be able to keep track with their team, understand their roles and responsibilities, understand the project that they're working on, and also communicate effectively and efficiently. communication is a big part in working with big projects with other developers. Programmers must also be capable of understanding the scope of the project from a high level. They also need to figure out the challenges and understand the problems that need to be solved. So when a programmer actually starts a new project, before jumping in right away and start writing code, you first need to understand the scope of the project from a high level. Understand what the project is, what are the goals, what exactly are you trying to accomplish. Then you need to figure out the challenges, because each project is different. Each application you create will be different, and each application and project will have their own challenges and problems. So you need to figure out those challenges. You need to understand the problems and also be capable of solving them. So often you need to just sit down and thoroughly think about the problems, the challenges, and how they can be solved. A programmer's job is to break big problems down into smaller parts and then figure out how to solve them. Because sometimes a project might be very big, and in those cases, while you always need to have an understanding from a high level, when you're actually working and writing code, you need to break the big problems down into smaller parts. You can use the first principles technique and keep asking questions until you break the problem down into a manageable part. And then once the problem has been broken down into a small and manageable enough part, you need to figure out how to solve it. This is where you might need to think a bit and use your creativity and experience to actually figure out a solution. And then, once you've figured out the solution, the work is not over, because after figuring out how to solve the problem, you need to actually write the solution in a language that the computer can understand. Which means for JavaScript, for example, you need to write the solution in the form of JavaScript code and programming syntax. And that is actually a vital skill a programmer must have. Now let's talk about a very important topic, thinking creatively. Now in programming, you'll often have to face problems and challenges that you don't understand, that you've never solved and don't know the solution to. However, in those cases, you can't give up. You have to try as hard as you can to understand the problem, and then you need to find a solution. And that requires a bit of creativity, experience, and knowledge. Now one thing to remember here is learning a programming language and syntax is actually easy. Now when you're actually starting to learn a new programming language, it might seem hard. But actually, learning the language is the easy part. What's hard is actually using the language creatively to solve problems and build working applications in real life. So being able to think creatively, find solutions to problems, and writing those solutions in code and programming language requires practice and experience. So if you don't have a lot of experience in programming and you're just starting at a beginner level, you might find it hard to actually think creatively and find solutions to hard problems. But don't worry, those will come with practice and experience. So the more problems that you face, the more challenges that you overcome, and the more experience that you gain in your programming journey, your creativity will automatically improve. Your ability to understand and solve problems will improve as well. And over time, you'll develop the skill easily, and thinking creatively will come naturally to you. Now, a programmer's job is to solve problems. Often that's the biggest and most important challenge programmers face in their daily lives. So understanding how to solve problems is very important and an essential skill to have when you're learning programming. Now when you're starting with the project, you must first break it down into basic features. Oftentimes a project might have a lot of features. It might be a big project. You might be working with a lot of other developers and people. So in those cases, it's easy to get overwhelmed. But in those cases, you must calm down and you must break the big project down into basic small features and tackle each feature individually. That'll make actually getting started a lot easier. And then once you start with one individual feature, break that feature down into even smaller steps and continue breaking until the steps are small enough and manageable. Now a senior and experienced developer might be able to take a big problem and instantly plot a solution. However, if you're a beginner developer, for a big problem, you might not be able to come up with a solution instantly. If that happens, then don't worry, it's okay. If you can't find a solution, then break that problem down into even smaller steps and continue breaking those until the steps are small enough and so specific and you can almost figure out the solution instantly. And then, using your knowledge of the programming language, plot a solution by figuring out how you're going to actually solve the problem. So once you've broken a problem down into its smallest parts, then you need to figure out how you're actually going to solve the problem, and you need to plot a solution. And this is where your knowledge of the programming language and your experience will come in handy, because the more knowledgeable you are and the more experience you have, the easier it'll be to actually find a solution. And once you've found the solution, you need to translate the solution into code that you need to write in order to solve the problem. And that is how you can go by when solving problems.